Internet! I'm Elliot the Purple Hair Doofus, and welcome back to The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Today we are covering chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's just dive right in, shall we? Chapter 4 begins with the victim of the most civilized theft ever that I was talking about yesterday actually meeting Kvothe. You see, what happens is he's walking around in the middle of the night, and he's starting to get cold, and he sees a fire in the middle of the forest. And he goes to the fire, and sitting around the fire is a great red-headed warrior, Kvothe. As Kvothe is scolding him for walking around in the middle of the night with no one else around him, calling him an idiot, well, they get attacked by the... Is it gone? Is it gone? That's right, they get attacked by a batch of scrael. A batch of them. Where yesterday there was just one, and now there's a batch. A pack, if you will. This is also where we learn that the victim of the most civilized theft ever is actually a chronicler. Or more specifically, the Chronicler. He goes around and he collects stories from people and he writes them down and he preserves them. Kind of like a history of the world in this man's mind and hands. The rest of the chapter deals with Kvothe tending to the Chronicler's wounds and calling him a complete doofus for being out in the woods alone in the first place. The next chapter begins with Kvothe going back to his tavern and his helper, Bast, just berating the crap out of him for leaving and only leaving a note that basically says, "If you're reading this, I'm dead." And the way that they are talking to each other, it gives me the feeling that there's more to them than just employer and employee. And this might just be a high fantasy thing or a kind of the way that they're living in this world kind of thing. But I was kind of getting the impression that Bast is romantically interested in Kvothe. But I could be completely and totally wrong. That's the beauty of me telling you about this as I'm reading, rather than after I've read the entire thing. Kvothe actually shows up to his tavern with the Chronicler over his shoulder, and Bast tends to both the Chronicler and Kvothe's wounds. The Chronicler is passed out. There's no problem getting him to rest. Kvothe, on the other hand, is having a bit of difficulty. So Bast sings him a lullaby, which kind of further solidifies my idea that maybe there might be just a little bit more going on there than just employer and employee. In the next chapter, the Chronicler wakes up and realizes that he was saved by the mighty Kvothe. And the Chronicler cannot be more excited, because as other people in the land have tried and tried and tried to find Kvothe, here he was in Kvothe's tavern, and he was just pretty much fanboying all around the tavern. Kvothe, on the other hand, is incredibly pissed off, because he could not believe that someone would be so stupid as to walk through the dangerous woods in the middle of the night, alone. He also really doesn't want people knowing that he is actually the Kvothe that everyone thinks he looks like, because he's actually Kvothe. Does this superhero remind you of anyone? Yeah. The Chronicler explains that he was on his way to transcribe the life of an earl in 3 days, but he would love to get the story of Kvothe's life as well. Kvothe sees that there's really no way that he's ever going to get the Chronicler to stop talking about how he's actually Kvothe unless he tells his story. So he agrees to tell his story, but he says he's going to need 3 days to do it. The Chronicler explains that he needs to be at the Earl's in 3 days, and how most people, when they tell their life story, only need 2 days to do it.
Sorry, but it's gonna take 3. And I don't care what you have to say about it. You're either going to take 3 days to tell my story, or you're not ever going to tell my story, ever.
After a lot of bickering back and forth between Kvothe and the Chronicler, they agree that the Chronicler will stay for 3 days and write about Kvothe's life. This is the point of the book where I was like, yes, I love this bit. This is awesome. I don't know why, but I was really excited for the idea of Kvothe telling his life story to someone and just reveling in his storytelling tactics. As Kvothe is talking, he realizes that the Chronicler isn't writing in any language that he's ever seen before. And the Chronicler describes his writing style, how it's all a bunch of dashes and crosses that translate to the 12 different ways that humans can make their mouths make sound. And it kind of reminds me of this other writing style that I could never ever read. This one. Right here. Can you see? And then there's like maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs of Kvothe trying to decide where to begin this story. And that's a perfect place to end, because I didn't want to start his story and then leave you waiting until tomorrow to do that. Today's question is about Bast and Kvothe. Do you think like I do? Do you think there's more going on there than just barman and barkeep? Or do you think there's more of a romantic angle between the two? Because that's kind of what the vibe I'm picking up on them is. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yesterday's question was all about genres, and what are your favorites and least favorites? And I'll be honest, this book is my least favorite genre. I hate high fantasy. I am just... like, I tried reading Lord of the Rings, and it was just a whole bunch of no. I was just... ugh. That being said, I am enjoying this book so far. It's kind of got its hooks in me. I can't explain why, but it does. My favorite genre of books is urban fantasy and urban sci-fi. So stuff that takes place in our world. Like if I were to walk out my door and just see an imp there, that would be my favorite book story ever. And I think it's because I could relate to the characters more, and it wouldn't be so much me trying to figure out the world that everyone else is living in. It would be the character trying to figure out this world that is invading his, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Well, that's about all we have for today's video. I still don't know what book I'm going to read for you yet, but I will have that for you at least by the midpoint of this book, so that you can read it and enjoy it before it gets ruined for you. I have been the Purple-Haired Doofus, reminding you to watch your Pajama Radius. And I will see you all in the next chapters of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Toodles!